Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video, and to continue off of my ranking of every pre-merge in the history of Survivor, here we'll be ranking every post-merge. So this will be a ranking of how entertaining I feel like the episodes after the merge are as a whole from every season of Survivor US. And with that, let's just jump right into it. We got 42 seasons to rank here. Let's start off at the bottom at number 42, the worst post-merge in the history of Survivor. To me, I've said this many times, I stick by it. It is the Australian Outback, which is such a slog of a post-merge where we do get a fine merge episode where it is this battle between Kucha and Ogakor. And once Ogakor wins, the entire season is pretty much already decided. To be honest, this is probably the worst possible scenario for a post-merge where even within the majority group, we already know the full-blown dynamic. So through that, we knew that Jerry and Amber were going to be the next to go from Ogakor. And then we knew that it was Tina and Colby as the true final two. So through that, it just makes the gameplay moving forward really boring. Now, technically, they do vote out Jerry and Amber before the points where they're supposed to, but there wasn't any true strategic reason for doing so. They did it because they didn't like Jerry, and then they respected Roger and Elizabeth more. And really just along the way, there's not much gameplay going on. It's a lot about the survival elements, a lot about rewards, and really just stuff I don't care about. And even the finale, where we get this proclaimed worst move of all time from Colby and voting out Keith over Tina, even then, most of the episode is dedicated to arts and crafts and reminiscing about their experience, and that's just so boring as well. Really, there's not much of intrigue going on in the post-merge Australian Outback outside of the merge episode. Even then, it's still a middling episode at best. So to me, again, really terrible post-merge. It's here at the bottom at 42. Next up, 41, another really bad post-merge, but at least it's shorter, and that season is Survivor Thailand. And Thailand's a weird season because obviously the fake merge happens, which means that the merge happens 2 episodes late, meaning we get a shorter post-merge, but it also means that the merge itself is very anticlimactic, because most of the intrigue of the season happened at the fake merge, where that's where the game was determined. So by the time we get to the merge, Chuigan is already up 5-3, meaning we get a straight-up pagonging. But again, a pro between this and Australian Outback is that we don't know the full dynamics of the Chuigan group by the time we get to where they have to take each other out. And even then, there's at least an attempt to flip the game from Ted, where he tries to take out Clay. At least there's stuff going on, unlike Australian Outback, where there's literally nothing going on towards the end of the season. But even then, obviously, it's still not a great series of episodes. Not much of intrigue is going on the entire way, and because that, it's still towards the bottom here at number 41. Now at number 40, we are moving on to a post-merge that has one really great episode in the finale, but outside of that, also a bit of a slog with a lot of ickiness around it as well, and that is the post-merge from Survivor Island of the Idols. Now, I think on paper this would be a bit higher had it not been for the Dan Spilo situation, where while most of the season is kind of a pagonging, there's at least more stuff going on. There's more attempted flips. There's Karishma's idol play. There's Tommy saving himself and taking out Missy. Like, there's stuff going on in the post-merge here. Even the Kelly blindside is great on paper. The problem is that it's surrounded by this Dan Spilo situation, which really saps all the air from the season. Makes the second half of the merge episode really dreadful to watch, and really just taints this post-merge with a really negative tone, considering Dan's still there until the penultimate episode of the season. And once Dan is gone, again, we get an all-time great finale. I love the finale of Island of the Idols. There's so much going on in that 2-hour period, but not to the point where it feels rushed. It is also a showcase of Tommy's gameplay, and I feel like the finale is fantastic. The problem is that everything else is tainted with this negative brush of Dan Spilo still being there and still getting airtime, which is the more mind-blowing thing to me, is that they didn't cut him out of the show at that point. So again, it's a pre-merge that I technically would have a few spots higher, probably around the upper 30s had the Dan situation not happen, but because it is happening and is such a major part of this post-merge, I had to leave it here at number 40. At number 39, we're getting to a post-merge that many people claim as the worst post-merge, and again, it's not particularly high here, and that is the post-merge from Redemption Island. And there's two things that are keeping this as high as it is. One is obviously the merge episode. I think the merge episode is one of the best merge episodes and one of the best episodes of the season. Again, to see Rob outmaneuver Zapatera and send Matt back to Redemption Island is a really great episode there. But after that, obviously, it is a slog where it is just a straight up pagonging of Zapatera all in a row. And then by the time we get to the Ometepes taking each other out, Andrew is clearly on the bottom, so that wasn't that big of a surprise. The Grant blindside is okay, but not that surprising that Rob pulls the trigger there. And then the end game is a lot of Rob just trying to get Ashley out, which is fine, which he ends up doing by the very end of it. Again, like a lot of the strength of this post-merge is just watching Rob dominate, watching him do his thing, watching him create the buddy system, watching him pull off the Matt blindside, watching him maneuver through Ometepe. Like, he does really good work, and that is most of the pros of this post-merge. But again, it is a slog through a lot of the middle of the post-merge, which makes it tough to rank any higher here than number 39. Number 38, another season that has a boring pagonging, but I do feel like this one has higher highs, and that is the post-merge from One World. And One World, again, I think has a better start. I think the merge episode is fine. While it's not the most interesting gameplay-wise, there's a lot of weird character stuff going on between Jonas and Tarzan. You then get the Michael Jefferson blindside, which is really just a showcase of Kim's game and her convincing Troyzan to flip against Michael. And then we get probably the best episode of the season in the Jay blindside, where she really just dominates from that point forward. Now, the very following episode is the This Is My Highland episode, where it's almost entirely Troyzan on the bottom and him trying to scrape his way out of it. And like, that's fine. But then beyond that, again, it's a pretty boring slog where Troyzan goes home, and then Kat, and then Tarzan, and Alicia, and Christina, and we get to the end where Kim wins. And it's a complete steamroll. Again, it's similar to the Boston Rob thing in Redemption Island. It is interesting to watch Kim maneuver through the game. Mind you, I don't think Kim is naturally as entertaining as Boston Rob, which is a thing in Redemption Island's favor. However, I do feel like this had better individual episodes than Redemption Island's post-merge, where really Redemption Island's post-merge only has a good merge episode and then like a fine-ish finale. This one at least has a strong first like 3 episodes of the post-merge, which is enough to land it higher here at number 38. Number 37, a post-merge that is really weird, and is a similar case to One World, just without the essence of a dominant player, and that is the post-merge of Survivor Nicaragua, where Nicaragua, again, has a fine merge episode, really strong second episode after the merge where Marty gets blindsided, and then we have the Brenda blindside, which is also really strong. The problem is that after that we get the double quit, and if the double quit happened and had no ramifications on the rest of the season, it wouldn't be that big of an issue. The problem with the double quit is that it really saps the energy away from the season, because this is a post-merge where we just lost Marty, Brenda, and now Nyanka all in a row, the 3 main characters of the season. So once they're all gone, we're left with a very middling group of people that just aren't as entertaining, and also the gameplay overall just really slows down from that point forward, where Chase, Sash, and Holly create a 3 and really just steamroll from that point forward, with the only intrigue being that Fabio is winning immunities. So again, while it does have a semi-strong start to the post-merge, the back half is not nearly as strong and not nearly as entertaining, considering most of the big characters are gone by that point. So again, for me, leaving it off here at number 37. Now, number 36, we're moving on to a post-merge that, again, is interesting because of it revolving around one particular player. And it's actually the same player as a season we talked about a few spots ago. At number 36, we do have Survivor All-Stars, where a lot of the intrigue of the post-merge of Survivor All-Stars really comes from the downfall of Boston Rob, where a lot of this post-merge is actually just really boring. It's a pagonging. File 5 gets a little bit more interesting, but even then, Boston Rob still gets his way. And yeah, it's pretty much a steamroll. There's not much interesting going on gameplay-wise throughout the entirety of this post-merge. However, you are seeing Boston Rob burn his jury votes one after the other. The merge episode, in particular, is him betraying Lex, and that's just such a riveting moment for the show. We then have him betraying Alicia, followed by him betraying Tom. And then we get to the finale where we have one of the most bitter juries in the history of the show, and that is all riveting TV to me. The problem is that obviously all the in-between is really boring because there's not much going on, gameplay-wise or anything else, really. So again, like, it is mostly a slog, but I do feel like this storyline of watching how Boston Rob loses the game here is something that's interesting to follow. So for me, it's enough to land it here at number 36. Number 35, keeping with an old school season, we're going to the post-merge of Survivor Africa. And this is one where, again, it starts off pretty strong. Like, I think it starts off with a, fine merge episode, but, it's not really the most interesting one, but at least sets up this, Kelly and Lex rivalry that really explodes in the next episode where they're both coming after each other. And really, this is, the first time we see a major flip attempted after the merge. And we almost see it being pulled off. Had it not been for Brandon voting with Lex, we would have had the big three of the season be on the bottom, and that would have been interesting. In the following episode after that, they flip the vote back on Brandon. That's fine. After that, it is a bit slower. It is definitely back to a straight up Pagani afterwards. But I do feel like those first 3 episodes were pretty solid, particularly that Kelly Goldsmith boot, which is probably one of the best post-merge episodes in Old School Survivor. So again, for me, it's kind of in the same ballpark as an All-Stars, but probably more interesting gameplay going on. So it's above it at number 35. Number 34, we have a post-merge that I wanted to put higher just because I feel like this one definitely has better individual moments than the ones that we've just talked about, but there really isn't much going on for the first half of this post-merge, and that is the post-merge of Survivor Panama. And Panama, again, starts off pretty slow because it is just a Lamina begonging. But once we get to the final 6, I think the post-merge really kicks up. Obviously, we get the 3-2-1 vote from Sri, which is just incredible TV there. We follow that up with the Shane blindside, which is a lot of fun. And then we get Danielle having to work with Terry to go to fire against Sri, and that's interesting. But then the final round really drags on, largely because of the Bruce medevac. But even then, we do have Danielle turning her back on Terry, and that's somewhat interesting. And along the way, again, you get the character moments you would expect from the likes of Shane and Courtney and Bruce, and there's a lot of fun moments even throughout this post-merge to where, again, I think it's a solid one. I mean, it's tough to put that much higher where, half of the post-merge is pretty stagnant, and even the last few rounds has, massive pacing issues, but it's certainly not a bad one, but it does land here at number 34. Now, number 33, we're moving on to a post-merge that I was largely conflicted on just because, I don't think there's a single great episode in the entirety of this post-merge, but it's also not a bad post-merge necessarily. I don't think there's any true bad spots either, and that is the post-merge of Survivor Game Changers. And again, I think the Game Changers post-merge is just largely just fine. It's fine modern Survivor. I do think there's issues with the editing. I think there are points where the editors do a pretty poor job in explaining why certain things happen and set up storylines that don't end up mattering for later on. But in terms of how the game plays out, it's largely just fine. I mean, you get the Aussie blindside early on, and you do get a lot of back and forth, largely from Sarah playing the middle, and you have her flipping against Ozzy and then flipping back to take out Debbie and then taking out her own closest ally in Zeke, and then she takes out Sierra and steals her legacy advantage. Then you have her flipping to take out Andrea, flipping back to take out Michaela. So again, there's a lot of back and forth in this post-merge. That definitely makes this the most dynamic post-merge we've talked about so far. And we obviously have Advantage Get-In, which don't know if to qualify that as a pro or a con. I mean, it's definitely a weird situation where I do think the tribal itself is kind of interesting. But obviously, it sets a bad precedent for Survivor as a whole. And to see Sarah win while playing this game where she's flipping back and forth was interesting to see. Now, again, I don't think there's a massive high point throughout this entire post-merge. It's mostly just kind of baseline. I don't really have any episode that I'm okay, this is really terrible, but there's no real episode that I'm this is also fantastic. It's just a very fine post-merge that does have some dynamic gameplay going on through it, though even then I don't think the show is properly showing that on the show. So for me, it's just kind of a fine post-merge, and it lands here at number 33. Number 32, we're moving on to another recent post-merge, and we're jumping to Survivor Ghost Island. And this is one where the bookends of this post-merge are really strong. The merge episode is incredible, where we see the downfall of Chris Noble. The finale is incredible, where we see the showdown between Dom and Wendell. In between, though, it is a slog. I mean, there isn't that much of interest going on, where it's really just Dom and Wendell dominating the entire game. And every single time they face adversity, Laurel ends up siding with them. There really isn't that much going on in the middle portion of the merge there, but the merge episode and the finale are stronger than any points within the Game Changers post-merge, even though the middle probably slogs more than the Game Changers post-merge. So for me, it's slightly above it at number 32. Now, number 31, we're moving on to one of the most recent post-merges, and that is the post-merge from Survivor 41. Now, this was a tough one for me, as there are aspects of this post-merge that I do really like. Obviously, we do get the Shan blindside, which is one of the best episodes in recent Survivor. We do get the Sydney boot, which is also a really interesting episode. And there is a lot of dynamic gameplay going on, particularly in the first half of it. Problem is, one, it gets a little bit stagnant towards the end. Towards the end, it is really just Erica and her alliance kind of steamrolling and taking out the threats along the way. Also, we have this ridiculous amount of twists going on, from the hourglass to the do or die to the split tribal to still having forced fire making. That really makes it feel like there's not much genuine Survivor going on here. While there are, again, great moments in the Shan blindside and the Sydney blindside, the very end of the post-merge is a bit of a drag that does slow down the season for me, leaving it here at number 31. Now, number 30, we're moving all the way back 30 seasons before that, and we are moving to Survivor Guatemala. And Guatemala's post-merge is an interesting one because there isn't that much dynamic gameplay going on, in the sense that it is, for the most part, a pagonging, though obviously they do end up flipping to vote out Jamie at one point. But again, it's a pretty straightforward post-merge, with the exception of Danny being able to squeeze her way to the end. The problem is that we're not really being shown how Danny does that, where, again, like, Danny's edit isn't really, we do see her relationship with Rafe, but outside of that, we don't really see much of Danny articulating her game, which I know that supposedly she was trying to hide her game from the producers because she was scared that they were going to tell the other players, but still, I think that is a knock against the post-merge here, is that while there is this great storyline to set up of how is Danny maneuvering through his game, we don't really get that, unlike a certain other season that we'll eventually be talking about. But through that, there are still some solid episodes. Like, even early on when the pagonging's happening, we have Gary finding the immunity idol, and we have a lot of fun Judd segments during that episode, and that's pretty good. We have the eventual Judd blindside, which is also very strong. We have the stuff with Cindy in the car, and then we have the choice to keep Danny around over Lydia, and then Danny winning final immunity, and Rafe releasing his agreement. And, like, all this stuff is really strong. Like, there's a lot of strong individual moments in Guatemala's post-merge, but, again, like, it is still harmed by the fact that it is still kind of a pagonging. Also, the pacing's kind of slow, but I still do overall really like the post-merge of Guatemala. It is here at number 30. Number 29, we're on to a post-merge that is really benefit from the fact that it's so short. And this is a season that had a really late merge, and through that only has a 5-episode post-merge, and that greatly benefits this one, considering one of the episodes alone is already really strong, and that is the post-merge from Survivor Cook Islands. And again, this is one where the merge episode is incredible. It's a really strong episode, all-time great merge episode, and it really propels this post-merge to being as high as it is, because the rest of it is kind of just It really is a pagong from that point forward, and while there is some interesting stuff coming up from Penner with his cockiness and his old trimates wanting him out, like, outside of that, there's not really much intrigue going on from that point forward, where it is a straight up pagonging. And we get to the end of the I-2-4, where we eventually get the Bucky versus Sundra firemaking challenge, which is kind of funny, and we get this big showdown at the end between Ozzy and Yul. But as a whole, again, the post-merge is kind of boring after the merge episode. But again, the fact that it is so short definitely boons it to where it is above the likes of Guatemala, being here at number 29. Number 28, we're moving on all the way back to the first ever post-merge. We're at Survivor Borneo. And Survivor Borneo's post-merge is kind of a mixed bag. Obviously, it does have the failings of older Survivor and the fact that it is very slow-paced. It is very confessional-based, and through that, it's a lot of just hearing people talk about other things instead of us actually seeing those things. Obviously, the gameplay is pretty basic, though through that, there are some interesting moments gameplay-wise, obviously with the Gretchen blindside right away, in the 4-1, the 1, the 1, the 1, the 1, the 1 vote. And then the eventual Jenna blindside is also really fun, with them latching onto the alphabet strategy. And after that, we have Kelly flipping on them, and her having to win out from that point forward, and that's interesting. And we have an all-time great finale. A finale where we instantly have Kelly flipping on Sue and follow that up by Richard throwing the final immunity challenge. Then we have Final Tribal where we get the Snakes and Rats speech. And again, a really iconic finale. So while there is maybe a bit of a low gameplay-wise, where there is obviously the pagonging, I do feel like the pagonging isn't a boring pagonging. There's interesting stuff going on alongside that pagonging. That adding that and the strong finale, it's enough to land it here at number 28. Number 27, we're moving on to another post-merge. It is similar to that of Guatemala's, but I think is slightly better because we get more insight on the eventual winner's game, and that comes from Survivor Vanuatu. Where again, here we are seeing a lot more of Chris and seeing how Chris is doing what he's doing and seeing how he maneuvers through the game, which we don't really see with Danny. That, and also I just feel like the overall dynamics are a bit more interesting, especially early on, where it felt like LePevy had more of a fighting shot in getting the numbers at the merge vote, where Rory gets blindsided. And while it is a begonging for next couple episodes, we eventually get the Leanne blindside, which is an all-time great episode. And again, while it slows down again after that, being a new type of begonging, this time begonging people that were on the outs of the Leanne vote, there's still more interesting stuff going on with like Eliza wanting to flip back, but not being able to do so because of Chris. And then we get the really strong finale, particularly the final tribal, where Chris takes Twyla and tells Twyla to be argumentative with the jury, and then we have him really sucking up to the jury, and all that's really fun as well. Again, to me, I think Vanuatu is like a better version of Guatemala's, with probably better individual gameplay moments as well. So for me, it's here at number 27. Number 26, moving on to one I actually thought was going to be higher, but I do feel like there's a little bit of a slog at the very end of it that knocks it down. And at number 26, we do have Survivor China. Now, I think China's post-merge starts off pretty strong. And we have the Jamie vote, which is kind of just like, but we get the fake idol shenanigans, which is kind of interesting. But then we get the John Robert blindside, which is a lot of fun. And a couple episodes later, we get the James blindside. So those are two really fun blindsides on this season. The problem is that after the James blindside, we really just get kind of a slog, where it really is a begonging from that point forward, where we know that Todd, Amanda, and Courtney are the top three, and they do get to the top three. And mixing that in with also like the Frosty Boot episode just being kind of whatever, it really leaves over half of this post-merge just being kind of fine. And even then, the merge episode's like kind of just middling also. So it's like we really only have like two really good episodes. So again, I struggle to put it that much higher when that's really the bulk of the entertainment of this post-merge. So for me, I left it here at number 26. Now 25, moving on to a similar post-merge, where again it has two really strong episodes, but outside that, mostly lackluster, and that is the post-merge of Survivor Blood vs. Water, where, again, we get kind of a whatever merge episode, like Aris gets blindsided. It would have been a good blindside had it not been set up for like 3 or 4 episodes at that point. But then following that, again, it's a straight up begonging. Tina and Vetus go home. Laura Moret going home is just like whatever, even though obviously they play up the she voted out her mom. But then we get to the interesting stuff. Again, 2 episodes in a row that are really fantastic. The Caleb blindside is fantastic, where they try to flip on Tyson. Tyson convinces Sierra to flip back and then gets the other side to vote for Sierra. Again, incredible stuff there. And then it's followed by the rock draw, which is one of the best episodes of all time. So those 2 episodes back to back, incredible. The problem is that after the rock draw, it's boring once again. At that point, Tyson Ray has the numbers to steamroll, and he does. Again, it's a post-merge that has 2 really strong episodes, but the rest is just kind of meh. Even though there's interesting dynamics going on, it's really not enough to put it much higher here than number 25. Now, number 24, moving on to a pretty notable post-merge, but one that I do struggle to put much higher considering, again, there is a lot of boring rounds within it, and that is the post-merge from Survivor Marquesas. Now, obviously, this is a post-merge that's most known for having the first ever full flip after the merge, and yeah, that does happen. And it's a big historic moment. The problem is that, again, the show doesn't really take full advantage of that flip. It doesn't make it as this big, grand moment. It just kind of comes off as underwhelming on the actual episode. Beyond that, the merge episode is really strong, where it's Boston Rob fighting for his life and eventually going home. But again, beyond the John Carroll blindside, it is a bit of a begonging till the final 5. And while the final 5 does pick up again, and then the finale's pretty strong, where we do have them going to rocks, and then follow that up with Vesepia turning on Kathy, it's like it's still pretty slow pace, and it's a middle 3 episode stretch that is really dragged out there. But there is a lot of interesting dynamic gameplay going on, especially for this far back in Survivor. That does leave it here at number 24. Number 23 is a post-merge that I did debate a bit on, just because I feel like this has a similar issue to that of Game Changers, where there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, but the show isn't accurately portraying it in an interesting way. But I do feel like there are still higher points across this post-merge to elevate it quite a bit from that. And at number 23, we do have Edge of Extinction. Now, again, Edge of Extinction is a season where it's really just blindside after blindside after blindside. It's really just big move after big move. And while that should be interesting on paper, again, I don't feel like the show shows this in an interesting way, where like we start off with the Joe blindside, which should be this big blindside for the show, but I really feel like the show didn't put much gravitas into it. And then we follow that up with like this Eric blindside, or again, another one should have been this big blindside for the show, but the storytelling of it's like all over the place, where they never properly explain dynamics of that blindside until literally right before it happens, where like we had been shown this like, oh, Eric and Gavin are super close. But then like right before the blindside happens, it's like, oh, Eric, Ron, and Julie are super close. And that's why Gavin's flipping. It's like, again, like there's a lot of like wonky storytelling going there. Following that, we got a fine episode, but one that has a really good tribal where all the craziness during the Julie boot happens. Then we follow that up with the Kelly Wentworth blindside, which is really great. But then we are in a bit of a lull for a bit, not because there's nothing going on, but again, just because like the show's not really being interesting in the way that it portrays like the War Dog blindside and the Ron blindside. But eventually we get to the finale, which is an all-time great finale. For me, again, this story arc of Chris returning to the game and trying to pull off move after move after move to win the game is a fascinating storyline to me. So again, it is a wonky post-merge here. Again, one that has a few solid episodes early on, but also has a lot of editing missteps that I think are things to knock it down, but also has a fantastic finale. So again, it's a bit all over the place, but for me, I did end up landing it here at number 23. Number 22, we're moving on to the most recent post-merge. We are at Survivor 42, which I was very conflicted on where to land this, because I'll be honest, I was very low on this post-merge at the time the season finished. However, I think when assessing it alongside all these other post merges, again, it does land around the middle here at 22. For me, I think it has a fantastic endgame. Like the final 7 on is really strong. I really do love the Drea boot episode, which could have been ruined by Do or Die, but thankfully it wasn't. But that was really great. The Omar boot episode was pretty strong. And then the finale definitely had some interesting dynamics going on within it. The problem is that before that, again, like I still don't think the rest of the season was the greatest. Like the merge episode was fine. While I still hate the hourglass twist, it's still like a fine merge episode. But then after that, like the Chanel boot, the split tribal, followed by the high boot, like all those were pretty lackluster to me. So again, like it kind of lands as a middle of the road post merge for me. It's one that starts off okay, ends really strong, but has a pretty boring middle stretch in my eyes. So again, for me, that lands it here at number 22. Now, number 21, we're on to a post-merge that, if we're really going like episode by episode, it probably is a weaker post-merge than some of the ones we've already talked about. But I do think storytelling-wise, it is a pretty strong post-merge, and that is the post-merge of Survivor Worlds Apart. And again, a lot of this post-merge is the run of Mike Holloway. And while the like first few episodes are fine, again, we get a pretty strong merge episode. We get a fine following episodes, but obviously we get the great episode where he flips at the auction. And from that point on, he's in survival mode. He is either winning a challenge or playing an idol from that point forward, but he's not laying down and dying. He is also still making moves along the way. And while he is failing at points, it is still interesting to watch him try to maneuver his way through the game. And while the finale can be kind of boring, because like obviously you know Mike's going to win at that point, I just feel like the overall storytelling in the back portion of the season is really strong in showing this underdog arc for Mike. So I do think it's a post-merge that's stronger than the sum of its parts. And because of that, for me, it lands here at number 21. Now, number 20, we're moving back to a post-merge that is pretty consistently entertaining, largely because of its cast. But again, there isn't the most interesting gameplay going on in the back portion of it. And that is the post-merge from Survivor Tocantins. And again, I think early on, there is some interesting stuff going on. Obviously, we get the Brendan blindside followed by a Tyson blindside, which are both really, really strong. The problem is that after that, it is mostly a pagonging. It is Sierra going home, followed by Debbie, and then Coach, and JT and Steven are the clear top 2 by that point. But again, there's still a lot of fun character stuff going on, largely because Coach is there. I think Coach really saves those boring stretches, considering how great of a character he ends up being. Again, the Martyr approach is an episode that should be terrible. Like, it should be a boring Coach boot episode, but because Coach is a really insane character, he makes it really entertaining. And again, that really sums up this post-merge. It's one that is fine. There are some good episodes here and there, but it's really propelled by its cast. I do leave it as high as it is here at number 20. Now, number 19, we're on to another post-merge that is greatly benefited by the fact that it is short. Where this is a post-merge that is kind of just fine all around. I mean, there is one episode in particular that is very strong, but out of the 5 episodes, most of them are pretty middle of the road, but because it is so short and through that doesn't really have a major slow point, it is relatively high here. So at 19, I do have Survivor Gabon. And Gabon is a season where like probably the weakest episode's the merge episode, which is pretty rare, but merge episode's pretty standard. Charlie goes home, 5-4, they have the numbers. But we follow that up with the Randy boot episode where we have like Bob making the fake idol, and giving it to Randy. Randy ends up playing it. We have the auction. We have a lot of fun stuff going on in that episode. And following that, it's kind of just pretty baseline again. I mean, we do have Corinne and Bob tricking Kenny into thinking that they have an idol, which is interesting. And then we have the repercussions from that the following episode where Crystal gets blindsided, and we have a fine finale. Like, it's a fine post-merge that does, again, have some pretty good character stuff going on along the way, and it is a relatively short one. So for me, it's good enough to land here at number 19. Now, number 18, we're moving on to post-merge that I think is remembered pretty poorly. I think many people connect this post-merge to that of Redemption Island, which obviously Redemption Island had very low, but this one is relatively high. And at 18, I do have the post-merge of Survivor South Pacific. And again, I don't think this post-merge is that bad. I mean, yeah, there is like a bit of a lull in the middle where there's a pagonging, and then like Cochran and Edna go home. But even then, I don't think those are entirely bad episodes. But again, we get a great merge episode where Coach flips over Cochran and takes out Keith. We then have two fast-forwarded episodes in a row where we have two double boots in a row, and I think that is something that definitely helps out the pacing of the season. Afterwards, we see the Cochran and Edna boots, which kind of highlight the downfalls of Coach's game. And then we get to the first Final Five round where Brandon Hans gives up immunity and gets voted out, and that's really great. And then we have a fantastic finale where Ozzy comes back to the game and is fighting to survive. He falls up short, and then we have Coach not admitting to his game at Final Tribal, which costs him the win. So again, I don't think this post-merge is as bad as people claim. We get a really solid final two episodes, get a solid merge episode, and while the gameplay isn't the most riveting in those middle episodes, at least a few of them are really fast-forwarded. So again, I think this is overall a solid post-merge, and it lands here at number 18. Number 17, we're moving on to another post-merge that has some really strong moments. I think the beginning of this post-merge is really fantastic, but then it does kind of peter out towards the end, and that is the post-merge of Survivor Philippines. Where again, right away, we get a lot of interesting gameplay from the RC boot, and we follow that up with the Jeff Kent blindside, which is one of the best episodes in the history of the show. We follow that up with the artist blindside, which is very solid. And then we get like a middling episode where Pete goes home, but then we get a really solid episode where Penner goes home. The problem is that after that, I do think it once again gets kind of boring. Obviously, it's just Malcolm being a target and continuously winning immunities, and he's eventually taken out Final Four, where the finale is like really slow paced because of Dana Boot messing up the schedule, and that definitely harms things a bit. But overall, like, I do feel like this is a solid post-merge. Again, really strong early stretch. Then the final 5, 6, and 8 rounds are all kind of mediocre, and then the finale is also pretty mediocre. So again, kind of evens things out, but I still think it's overall really strong, and it's here at number 17. Now, number 16, we're moving on to a season that I think is kind of remembered as the post-merge of the season really saves the season. And while the post-merge is definitely stronger than pre-merge, which isn't hard to do, I will say I don't like the post-merge as much as I used to, and that is the post-merge of Survivor Karamoan. And for me, Karamoan's post-merge, once again, starts off pretty strong. It has a solid episode where Corinne goes home, a pretty good episode where Michael Snow goes home, and then an all-time great episode where we get the Three Amigos tribal. The problem is that after that, again, I think the season really slows down. You get the Reynolds, you get the Malcolm boot, which is just kind of boring. You get a double boot where Reynolds goes home the first half, and then Andrew goes home the second half, which is kind of interesting, but also like really foreshown. The Brenda boot to me was just also kind of even though it's supposed to be this like big emotional moment. And then the finale is also kind of boring, where again, the pacing's kind of off due to Eric's medevac. And through that, we just get a really big slog leading up to a Cochran win. So again, like, I feel like it's not that dissimilar from that of Philippines. It's slightly above it in the sense that I think there are bigger tribals along the way. We get the Hold Up Reynolds moment. We get the Three Amigos moment. I guess the Brenda blindside. But like, for me, it's like, it's one that I don't find particularly interesting to watch nowadays. And because that kind of slips from where it probably would have been a while ago. And because that it lands here at number 16. Now, number 15, we're moving on to a post-merge that I might have higher than most people, considering I know a lot of people don't like the ending of this season, but I do still enjoy the season as a whole, and that is the post-merge from Survivor HHH. And really, I feel like the final 7 on, the point where Ben keeps on using idol after idol after idol, I think that's the best part of the season. I know that's probably not a popular opinion, but I think the final 7 rounds is one of the best in Survivor history. We get the final 6 round, which is mostly just fine, and then the final 5 round where Devin saves himself with the vote split. And then, even though, again, it's a tragedy to see the forced fire make its appearance, like I still feel like it's riveting storytelling to see Ben lose the immunity challenge, get a second chance, and beat Devin in fire. And I think that is a satisfying story arc. And even before that, the final 8 and final 9 rounds are both pretty interesting, where we have this plan of pretending to work with the other side while the JP and Joe boots happen. And really, it's like the beginning of the merge that's probably the least interesting part, where it's just kind of a healer pagong for a few episodes. But I still think as a whole, I do really like this post-merge. So for me, it lands here at number 15. Now, number 14, we're moving on to another post-merge that, again, I think is for the most part remembered fondly, but I still find some soul points within it, and that is the post-merge of Survivor Cambodia. Now, Cambodia for me is one that, again, like has some pretty big moments. I think the Kelly Wentworth Idol play is obviously something to mention. You then have the final 10 and final 9 rounds, which are both think are pretty strong, where they initially flip against Steven, but then Jeremy uses Idol to take out Sierra, and then we follow that with the actual Steven boot. Both of those are pretty strong. And we have the finale, which is really strong, where we get the no votes tribal, followed by a decent final 4 and final 5 rounds. But really, everything else to me is like kind of on the slower side. I mean, the Abby boot is kind of just like whatever. The Joe boot's kind of whatever. The Kelly Wigglesworth boot is a mess of an episode. The merge is kind of just like a mixed bag. Like I do feel like as a whole, Cambodia is kind of on and off, where obviously it has these big iconic moments, but the rest of it is not as consistent as I would like it to be. And I feel like it is so game heavy to the point where it doesn't feel like there's much fun going on in the post merge here. So again, I do struggle where exactly land it, but I did end up landing it here at 14. And next time we're moving on to number 13, where we have a similar post merge, in that being the post merge of Survivor Winners at War, where again, I think Winners at War has some great rounds within it, but the rest of it is kind of just okay. I will say I do feel like it's probably a bit more consistent than Cambodia, where, I mean, there are a couple slower rounds, particularly like the Nick boot and then the Jeremy boot, but I feel like everything else is fine enough. The merge is like fine, but then like the Adam boot has some interest going on there. The Tyson boot is a mess of an episode, but again, still solid. And then we obviously get the Sophie Blindside, which is one of the best episodes in the history of the show, followed up by the Kim Blindside, which is also very strong. And then we have a very strong finale. That, while I do feel like it's a bit drawn out, I do think it is still a great conclusion to the season, a great culmination of 40 seasons of Survivor, where we see Tony face so much adversity and still is able to overcome it. So Winners at War for me, again, I think it's pretty much a better version than the Cambodia post-merge, even though I do still have the same issues of it probably being a bit too game heavy at points, and also having some wonky editing, but it's still here at number 13. Now number 12, we're jumping back in time quite a bit here, all the way to Survivor Fiji, which I think is for the most part a pretty solid post-merge. I mean, you get one episode of the Alex boot, which is a really boring episode with no real suspense to it. But outside of that, I think it's actually a solid post-merge, with the merge episode itself being kind of wonky because obviously we have the Michelle boot with this like really weird last second twist that isn't ideal, but it's still an interesting round in itself. We have the Edgardo boot, which is one of the best episodes in Survivor history. Follow that up with the Mookie boot, which is kind of boring, but also kind of interesting because it's like Alex flipping his vote to ruin a vote split, and that's kind of interesting. And the final two episodes are really strong, mostly revolving around the Dreams Yao-Man deal, where Dreams tries to blindside Yao-Man after making a deal, all for Yao-Man to save himself with the idol, and then we follow that up with the actual events of the deal, where Dreams wins Final Four immunity and still decides to keep it. So again, that's really great. I personally like Final Tribal, and while there is definitely an icky feeling to it with some microaggressions going on, I do feel like for the most part, it's pretty fun as well. So again, I overall do really like the post-merge of Survivor Fiji. And to be honest, from this point forward, we're getting into all post-merge that I do think are really, really great. So for me, Fiji lands here at number 12. Now, number 11, another post-merge that I think probably has a slower start than most of the other ones around this spot on the list, but I think as a whole is a really good one, and that is the post-merge, again, quote-unquote merge from Survivor Palau. Now, obviously, I'm considering the point where Stephanie goes to Koror, the point of the merge. And again, like I think the beginning is kind of slow. The Kobe boot's whatever. Janu quit is whatever. The Steph boot is fine, but then like beyond that, the final 3 episodes are all-time great episodes. Like it's weird where like the first 3 are kind of middling, but then the final 3 are fantastic. Like we get the Greg blindside, which is a really riveting round of gameplay where Tom and Ian are willing to go to rocks to take out Greg, and end up getting him out by flipping over Katie. We then have Ian flip on Tom and contemplate taking him out, which Tom finds out about it and flips on Ian at the final 4, and that's really great. And then we obviously have the final immunity challenge, where we get the Tom versus Ian dynamic and Ian giving up his game to prove his friendship. And I think all this is really strong. I think the back 3 episodes of this post-merge are 3 of the best episodes, debatably of all time. The problem is that, again, the first 3 are also kind of but it does all lead up to a Tom win, which is all like kind of a satisfying storyline for a season. I also think the downfall of Ian is a very satisfying storyline, and because that, for me, ends up landing here at number 11. Now, number 10, we're moving on to post-merge that is kind of the opposite, where the front half of it is filled with all-time great episodes, and the back half of it is fine. Again, it's not bad, it's fine. But that season ends up being Survivor Samoa. And again, like, seeing Russell take over the game in the early merge section is really great TV. I mean, first up, we get the Eric Cardona boot, which is really great to see Galoo kind of set up their own downfall there. And then we follow that up with, obviously, Russell idling out Kelly. That's really great. We then follow that up with Russell flipping over Fincher and Shambo to take out Laura. That's really great. And then we follow that up with Russell flipping back to take out Fincher. Now, the following episodes are just fine, where we do have this double boot episode of Dave Ball and Monica going home, but even then, that has some intrigue to it. And we have the Shambo boot, which is whatever, but then we get a pretty riveting finale as well, especially considering we see the full downfall of Russell at that point. Like, half of it is an all-time great post-merge, while the other half isn't quite to that level, but I feel like the downfall of Russell is a much more satisfying storyline to me than the downfall of Ian and the success of Tom, I guess. So this one ends up being a step above it at number 10. Now, number 9, we're moving on to a post-merge that is another one with some really great episodes towards the beginning, but does kind of meander for a little bit. That keeps it out of the top tier, but at number 9 here, I do have Survivor Co. Wrong. And Co. Wrong is interesting post-merge here in the fact that I think it is greatly harmed by its medevacs. Obviously, the Neil and Joe medevacs both take up an entire episode, and through that, I think kind of drags it down a little bit, because I do think the rounds that there actually is a vote out are mostly strong. I mean, we get the Nick vote out, which is really good, and then we get 2 all-time great episodes back-to-back in the Debbie blindside, followed by the Scott blindside, both really strong episodes, and then the Julia and Jason boots are kind of just fine. And we have kind of a fine finale. Again, like, pacing's a bit off, but the overall events of it are fine. And, like, as a whole, again, like, I think it's a solid post-merge. It's a post-merge that has, like, 3 really incredible rounds back to back to back. And even, like, the Neil medevac episode isn't the worst episode in the world. It's obviously underwhelming to not see a vote out in a merge episode, but there are a lot of interesting dynamics going on there. But again, the season does end in a bit of a snail's pace, largely due to the medevac, but I still think as a whole, it is a solid post-merge, with the Debbie and Scott rounds being what really elevates it to being this high here at number 9. Now, number 8, a similar post-merge that might have like some minor lulls here and there, but overall really strong, and that is the post-merge of Survivor David versus Goliath. And this is one where I even go back sometimes to just watch certain parts of the early merge episodes of David vs. Goliath, because they are really strong. Like, I really, really love the John Hennigan blindside, obviously, and then the Dan blindside back-to-back. 2 incredible episodes that really show these underdogs and the Davids taking control of the game, and that's really interesting. Even the merge episode is fine. Well, the Elizabeth boot was kind of mediocre. The way it happens is kind of interesting. And then beyond that, we have the Davids kind of crumbling on themselves. We have them flipping to take out Carl, and then Gabby is booted immediately afterwards, and Christian, and then Davey, but like Nick wins out and still ends up leading to a David win. Like, there is a lot of like dynamic gameplay, a lot of shifting dynamics going on throughout this entire post-merge section of the game. That is really interesting. But again, for me, it is really the John Hennigan and Dan boot rounds that are back-to-back that do really elevate it to where it is as high as it is here at number 8. Now, number 7, we're moving on to a season that I think is mostly made on its post-merge, where the pre-merge is fine, but the post-merge is really what elevates it to being one of my personal favorite seasons, and that is San Juan Del Sur. And again, this season has 3 fantastic episodes back to back to back. where despite a mediocre merge episode due to the Julie quit, we then get the Josh boot, followed by the Jeremy blindside, which is one of my all-time favorite tribals, followed by another of my all-time favorite tribals, where Wes gets idled out of the game. Those are really strong. And then after that, we're kind of in a little bit of a lull, where it is Reed and Alec going out back-to-back, but even the Alec round has some intrigue, obviously, with Natalie flipping the vote at the last second, and then we also have the John Mish blindside, which is great, and in the finale, we have the Baylor blindside. So it is a really strong endgame stretch, despite the fact that we have two kind of middling episodes in the middle of it. But really, this narrative of Natalie wanting revenge and being able to pull off some really impressive maneuvers in the endgame, plus also the really fantastic Jeremy blindside, really excel this one all the way to number 7. Now number 6, we're moving on to a season that is very strange in the sense that, to me, this season has one of the all-time worst pre-merges ever, but also has one of the best post-merges that make this a very conflicting season to talk about. But at number 6, I do have season 6, we have the Amazon. And again, like I talked about in the pre-merge ranking, I really don't like the pre-merge of Amazon, but the post-merge is really good. It's really where Rob Cesternino takes control of the game. And to be fair, it does take a little bit for us to even get there, but we do start off with the Roger blindside, which is not my favorite episode in the world, but I can get the praise that it gets with it obviously being very obvious about where it's going, but using it to be this like dunking on Roger. And then the Dave boot's kind of boring, but then after that, it really doesn't stop from then until the finale. We get the Dina blindside, which is very strong, followed by Rob taking control of the game by flipping the game on Alex. Then after that, him taking out the swing vote in Christie, to which the game becomes a bit more stable after that, but there's still a lot of interesting things going on in the final couple episodes, and all leading up to the downfall of Rob at the very end of it. Again, like I think overall it is a very strong post-merge, particularly from the Dina boot to the Christie boot. I think that 3-episode stretch are 3 of the best episodes of all time, and the episodes that surround it aren't entirely bad in their own right. So for me, again, very strong post-merge. It lands here at number 6. And now number 5, we're moving on to a post-merge that happened immediately after it, and that is Survivor Pearl Islands. And again, this is another one that like kind of rides off the back of the Amazon post-merge, where again, Fair Play clearly took inspiration from Rob Cesternino, and through that tries to execute a very similar style of game. And through that, we again have a fine merge episode where Savage goes home. Kind of an obvious boot there, and then a boring Rhino boot. But then that's followed up with the Rupert blindside, which is one of the best episodes in history of the show. Followed that up by the T blindside, where Fair Play jumps back, and then we have him jump back again to vote out Krista. And then we have them getting caught, and Burton gets blindside, which is another all-time great episode. And then we have a fine finale, but that finale does include the Dara boot round, which is pretty strong. So again, it's another one that's like, it's on par with season 6. I mean, it's really back to back. I think this one's probably slightly better due to the gravitas of the Rupert and Burton blindsides probably being better than that of the blindsides from the Amazon. But again, they're very close. They're pretty much neck and neck. But for me, I did land it one spot above it at number 5. And now number 4. And for me, this is the definitive top 4. For me, these are a tier of their own. These are post merges that don't have a bad episode in sight. These are all really strong post merges through and through. And at number 4, we're starting it off with Millennials versus Gen X, which again, I think the post-merge is really what makes this season. Now, I will say that I do think the beginning of the post-merge isn't as strong as the end of the post-merge, but it doesn't mean that it's bad. I still think the merge episode is mostly just fine. But when we follow that with the Taylor boot, which is kind of obvious that Taylor's going home, but it also has a lot of really interesting character moments for Taylor and Jay. We follow that up with the eventual Chris boot, and then we get the all-time great episode in the Rock Draw, one of the best episodes in the history of the show. Follow that up by the Zeke boot where Will flips, and that's also a really strong episode. And then we get a double boot immediately afterwards of Will and Sunday being booted back to back. And then we get the finale, which is one of the best finales of all time as well, with so much going on there where Jay gets blindsided, followed by Brett being taken out, and then for David to finally go home at the very end. And we get a really strong final tribal as well, where we get a lot of debating between the finalists. So again, I think it's a really strong post-merge stretch, but it ends up at the bottom of these top tier seasons, considering I do feel like those first couple episodes of the merge here are probably the weakest episodes out of this top tier of seasons. So for me, again, it is here at number 4. Number 3, we have the post-merge from my favorite season of all time, and that is the post-merge of Survivor Cagayan. And Cagayan's post-merge to me is very strong. Like, obviously, we do start off with the best episode of all time in my eyes in the Kaguya merge episode where Sarah gets blindsided. Really incredible there. We then get the Morgan boot, which could have been boring, but we do get a lot of interesting dynamics there with Spencer finding the idol and having Wu steal it, and that leads to this massive idol hunt, and that's really fun. And it's also followed up by the LJ boot, which is an all-time great episode as well. We also have the Jeffra boot, which is a massive blindside. We have the Trish boot, which is great as it also includes a lot of great character moments for Trish, Cass, and Tony. And again, this is a really fantastic post-merge stretch of the season. Again, for me, the reason why it's not elevated to the top 2 is because the top 2 are actually 2 seasons that have really short pre-merges, and through that I think has less slower points, where again, like, even though I think this is a really great post-merge that's mostly consistent, the Jeremiah and Tasha rounds are still like a little bit more boring than the rest, to where it does lead to the other 2 being above it. But again, the Kaguya post-merge is still incredible from beginning to end, and that's why it's here at number 3. Now number 2, we're moving on to a post-merge that I know is claimed to be not that good, which I really never got. I mean, to me, I've always really liked the post-merge of this season, and even consider it to be more consistent than the pre-merge, despite the pre-merge having bigger overall moments, and that is the post-merge of Survivor Heroes versus Villains, which again is an all-time great season. I think everyone agrees with that, but I never quite got that people thought that the post-merge was like pretty bad. Like, to me, it's like, again, the merge episode's incredible. Obviously, we get Parvati's double idol play, we get JT facing the ramifications of him giving his idol to Russell. That's all really great. Again, all-time great episode there, and that's followed up by the Amanda boot, which again can be looked at as boring, but it does include a lot of flipping around there, where we do see Sandra trying to flip over to the heroes, but we also see Russell being able to flip Candace back to the villains. And again, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. Plus also we have the idol clue fight between Danielle and Amanda, and that's really fun. The following episode's a double boot episode where we see the vote instantly flip back onto Candace, and that's followed up by the Danielle boot where we see Russell trying to split Danielle and Parvati apart, and that's really fun. And then, yeah, I agree the Rupert boot is probably not the greatest episode in the world, but even then, it's still not an entirely bad episode. And the finale is pretty strong, where again, we're 100% seeing the downfall of Russell once again, but getting some great confessionals from Sandra along the way that foreshadow it. And again, like, for me, I do really like this post-merge. It's only 5 episodes long, and 4 of the 5 to me are top tier episodes, with the other one being just a middle of the road episode. Like, I personally think this is a really strong post-merge, mostly consistent the entire way. It's here number 2. Now number 1, and for me this was a pretty definitive number 1. I don't think there's been a post-merge that can come close to this one and will ever come close, considering just how near perfect this post-merge is. And that is the post-merge of Survivor Micronesia. And again, this is a shorter post-merge. It's only 6 episodes. And every episode up until the finale is an all-time great episode. It's a really strange case where actually the finale is the worst episode of the bunch, which is typically not the case. But again, we started off with the merge where we get Eliza's "It's a effing stick" moment, and that's really fun. We follow that up with the Ozzy blindside, one of the best episodes in the history of the show. We follow that up with the Jason blindside, where he finds the idol in that episode just to be blindsided with it. We follow that up with the Alexis blindside, where Amanda finds the idol to blindside Alexis, and we follow that up with the Eric Reichenbach blindside, where he gives up immunity. Like, it is an insane stretch of episodes there with blindside after blindside after blindside, and for me, the Eric, Ozzy, and Jason boots all being like top of the top tier episodes in the grand scheme of Survivor. And again, the finale is kind of meandering. Like, yeah, kind of obvious that Natalie's going home first, and then after that, once Suri doesn't win final immunity, she's going home, and obviously it's a heartbreaking outcome for Suri there, but I still think this is the most consistent post-merge in the history of the show. To be honest, this is probably the most consistent, like, 6-episode stretch in the history of the show, where it is insane the quality of these episodes here. Maybe can only be rivaled by the final pre-merge episodes leading into the post-merge of Heroes vs. Villains, but it is insane the quality of these episodes that are back to back to back to back to back, to where for me it is undoubtedly the best post-merge in the history of the show, and because that lands here number 1. But there we go. I mean, that is my ranking of every post-merge in the history of Survivor US. Obviously, moving forward, we'll do more Survivor Big Brother videos, as you can expect, including bigger rankings like this. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.